Poonam Goyal, senior U.S. Retail analyst, joins us here via Zoom. And Elliot Stein, Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst, joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Elliot, let's start with you. What is the tariff impact matrix that you guys have come up with?
Yeah, so thanks, Paul. So the BI Tariffs Matrix is a matrix that we launched just yesterday. It's available on the Bloomberg Terminal at BI space Tariffs Go. And like you said, BI analysts for weeks have been putting numbers on what tariffs mean for their companies. And this is all distilled in the BI Tariffs Matrix. You go to the matrix, it lists 200 companies, and we're continuing to add more companies across 20 different industries. And it shows you what their blended tariff rate would be based on their exposure to different countries where they're getting goods for their sales in the US and what the tariff rates are on those countries. And then from there, our analysts have calculated how much the cost of goods will increase for all these companies' sales into the US, how much their profit will take a hit as a result, and how much they would have to increase prices both in the US and globally to offset the impact of the tariffs.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Honestly, this is why Bloomberg Intelligence is so awesome. And we'll get to retail with Poonam in just a second. But Elliot, when you were putting this together from all the different sectors, what stood out to you? What did you learn the most?
So, it's really interesting. So we also published a note on this yesterday. And in that note, there's a piece from Anurag Rana and the tech team. I like to filter by the blended tariff rate and see which companies are paying more tariffs as a result. And if you look at Apple, because they have such a high exposure to China, their blended tariff rate is still 20%. But a company like Dell has a much more diversified supply chain. And so their blended tariff rate is much lower, roughly, I think, maybe 4 or 8%. I forget the exact number. And so as a result, the amount that both these companies would have to increase their prices to offset tariffs varies quite dramatically, with Apple being close to 9% and Dell being close to 2%.
So Poonam, on the retail side of the business, how much more do you think consumers are going to have to pay at the store for stuff?
Sure. So if we assume that the entire cost is passed to the consumer, on average across the 39 retailers we analyzed here in the U.S., it's a low double-digit increase. That said, we do expect some mitigation efforts to take place, so we do expect that to moderate to probably mid to high single digits, worst case scenario.
That sounds bad. Is that bad?
Price increases are bad, right? Because they influence demand, and that means that consumers could pull back in where and how they choose to spend. So ideally, we would like to see no price increases, low single digit at best, which we think is manageable. But if it's beyond that, there could be a pullback in demand, especially for discretionary items, right? Things that you can kind of hold off on, you can trade down for. So it is negative. If things worsen and if China tensions don't come down from here.
Are there certain product lines or certain categories, Poonam, that are more at risk? I just think, I remember seeing a story on sneakers, and it seems like all the sneakers come from China. In that part of the world.
They actually come mostly from Vietnam. So as long as the Vietnam tariff rates stay at 10%, which we'll know in early July if that's the case or not, I think that headwind is largely manageable. In fact, for the athleisure companies like Nike, Adidas, we've estimated that the tariff rate currently should only be around 10%. And that's because that's the current levy on the other countries outside of China. These companies have diversified a lot since the last round of tariffs, where they've actually moved out of China into the neighboring countries. And as long as the tariff is low there, we think it's manageable. If tariffs do increase in early July from the 10%, it's a bigger risk to these athleisure companies. Paul, you asked about where the impact is greater is across the 39 companies that we've analyzed. I think you have to look at the toy makers, you have to look at the dollar stores, and even some of the specialty apparel stores where they are more heavily exposed to China, in some cases largely exposed to China, and there the tariff rate is greater than 50%, and the exposure is much higher, so a much bigger impact.
Yeah, if you search by U.S. price hike and do, a top down, like Mattel, 31% estimated price increase, Five Below, 39%, Dollar Tree, 27%.
I don't think those people are going to like.
That's
people who shop at Dollar Tree. I don't think they're going to.
That's really rough. I could do this forever. H&M 20%. Target. Oh, where'd you go? Target looking at 20%. Elliot, are we going to see lawsuits, legal issues in relation to this?
Yeah, we already are. And just going back to the matrix for a sec. So we didn't mention yet, but you can click below the matrix and to the left of the matrix as well, because there are interactive calculators for all these companies where you can play around with some of the different assumptions, put in your own numbers, and get the output as a result. But in terms of lawsuits, yeah, we've seen multiple lawsuits being filed. My colleague Holly Fromm covers them, but I've been tracking them as well because they're interesting. We've seen companies from lawsuits from importers as well as blue states like California and Oregon. They're filed in courts all around the country, but they're probably all on their way to being consolidated to a court here in New York called the Court of International Trade, which deals with lawsuits over tariffs. And there are two main claims in these cases. One is that the government is exceeding its statutory authority under IEEPA, which is the statute it's using, the Emergency Powers Act. And then the second one is that even if it does have the power under IEEPA to implement these tariffs, Congress delegated its authority to the president improperly. These are issues of like first impression. We've never seen a president use IEEPA for tariffs before. And at the end of the day, we think it's a close call, but we think the administration will win these lawsuits and the tariffs will stick.
Poonam, 10 seconds. Amazon in this thing about, putting the tariffs into price?
Yeah, they denied it. So I think they will have to raise prices to the consumer, especially the third-party sellers, but I don't think they'll show it. Not on the main Amazon website, at least.
Yep, got it. Okay, Poonam Goyal, Elliot Stein, Bloomberg Intelligence, great work on this tariff import matrix.